you bring me some coffee? Hey, welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Speedify Live Q&A. All right. For complicated reasons, it kind of seems like I might be going solo today. So, hey, everybody. I'm Alex. If you have questions, you just post them in the comments wherever you are reading. You know, YouTube, Twitch, I'll see them. I'll answer. So this is your chance to get some answers from people at Speedify. Oh my God, it's Will. Exciting. Exciting. Look at us. All right. Woo. And I've even got coffee. So it's the big three. Alex, Will, and coffee. All right. Woo. How are you, Will?
Good. I haven't seen this green screen before.
Yeah. Neither have they.
Oh, they're shocked.
So you were still waiting for the new lights to go behind. So leaning forward to avoid shadows on it.
Okay.
Really improves the quality. Yeah. All right. Anyway, this is gonna get better. There are lights on order. I know that. All right. Bob has the same question as me. When does Speedify 17 come out, Will?
Pretty soon. Yeah, we're wrapping up testing on it. It's going to be a really solid release with a lot of performance and stability improvements, particularly for the kind of high-end streaming that a lot of broadcasters will do. So we were pretty well with like RTMP and HLS and the more common ones, but sometimes there's some other protocols that.
Yeah, we kind of ended out doing a sort of ad hoc beta test here. So there's a few people out there who have 17 who have been beating the crap out of it, and we appreciate them. And there's been new 17s every day this week. Some kind of esoteric stuff, but I'm not sure that it doesn't. There are enough weird little corners that we fixed that I'm not sure that like normal people don't hit one of those corners every day,
Yeah, I mean, Speedify gets better with every release. We certainly don't make it slower.
Yeah. But yeah, serious improvements for the professional streamers, which I think are going to float down to just be thing works better for everybody every time, right? Mm-hmm. All right. Hi, Speedify. Love this. Hi, team. Love the Speedify ecosystem. Used it today to make a living. Yes. What is the best, most stable platforms? Windows on a Nook or Linux on a Nook? Thanks. I think Linux, right?
I would hope so. I mean, I can't speak for. Maybe there are really good Windows Nooks out there, but I would expect it to be Linux, right? It's got to be.
Windows Update and crap.
Windows does seem to be everywhere, though. I mean,
yeah. I mean, we work on Windows, right? I'm not saying if you have a Windows Nook, you don't have to throw it out or whatever. Reformat the hard drive. A lot of our professional customers have started on Windows and then switched to Linux, and it's not like because of performance or whatever. It's because like nightmare stories of it deciding to reboot to apply updates. On the Tuesday morning that they're filming the president's speech. And it's like, what the hell? Because, it's Patch Tuesday. Most important thing is to get all those computers rebooted. So just been enough nightmare scenarios on Windows. And I feel like Linux, probably just people can be more disciplined. I'm just accepting that this little Linux box is just my bonding thing. And even though it could also run Word and Excel in a browser, people don't. So my advice would be Linux. Either a Debian or an OpenWRT. Debian's good. Debian's fine. That's probably what we actually run on the most, right?
Debian and Ubuntu, which are very similar.
Ubuntu, Raspberry Pi OS is another Debian, and then the whole bunch of them are similar enough. They're the same. So my advice would be Linux. All right. So 17 is coming. Kind of a huge release. So we meant it to be a minor release, but you know, we just keep fixing everything that everyone complains about. We're not putting it out till we get the complaints pretty darn close to zero. And so it has quietly turned into what I think you'll recognize as a huge release.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
Shub says, Internet Linux is inherently more stable just because it loads 10 times less stuff by default. Yeah, that's what I think when you say this Linux box is going to run Speedify, it ends out pretty much just running Speedify, right? And, you know, the start menu ads and stuff that end out running on the Windows box, you know, and then need those software updates on Tuesday, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you have more control over the updates because at this point, Windows, you know, for reasonable reasons dealing with consumers, they're pushing the security fixes on people because they don't want to get blamed. But you know, Linux, you update when you want to update when you're not in the middle of something critical.
Yeah.
So yeah, so right now 16.9.1 is the current version of Speedify. It's good, but yeah, better is coming.
Better is coming. Better is always coming.
Yeah, so if you are on Windows, make sure you're on 16.9.1, by the way.
Yeah.
We got a big speed increase in that last release for Windows. We changed which driver we use, and it can get much larger packets in, and it makes a huge difference. So if you don't load something, then you don't have to patch it for security. Yep. But yeah, Windows, there's all this stuff that loads. I mean, there are instructions for how to strip down your Windows, but then you're not really on the Windows that Microsoft tested anymore by the time you start taking all these things out, right? Like, is that actually better? It probably is actually better, but I'm not sure that you can't get yourself into a weird situation with some of those recipes for, you know, removing Windows built-in services, you know. Yeah. So that's a little tricky. I worked at AWS. They have their own version of Linux they use for everything, and I fully support that. Yeah, I mean, they're big enough. Yeah, complete control, right? Although you get big enough, and finally the operating system team is in a different building, and they're taking questions from other teams as well. And at some point, you're not, you know, you know, it's almost like dealing with another company, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that Amazon has a lot of little crevices like that.
But on the client side, I prefer Mac OS, iOS, and iPadOS. But on servers, I prefer good solid Linux. Yeah, all of our servers are Linux, right? Without exception.
Yeah.
Unless you consider the Mac builder. We got the one Mac that is building all of our iOS and Mac releases, and I guess it is a server.
It's a little bit of a different kind of.
But other than that, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I'm using a Mac. I'm using iOS, but all of our servers are Linux everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine running a speed server on iOS. It's just not going to work.
Well, with the self-hosted speed servers, you actually can run a speed server on Windows or Mac or Linux. It's a Docker container.
Yeah.
But it has to have a real public IP address.
Yeah.
And so in practice, I don't know if anyone, except for people trying out, does this work, is actually using it on anything but Linux. So, oh man.
I'm curious what changes AWS would make to their version of Linux, the kernel and things like that. Imagine it's also like security stuff for virtualization and maybe some network performance stuff for whatever weird data center stuff they have.
right. I'm curious. For your Speedify IP addresses, do they come up as normal end user ISP addresses, or do most of your services consider to be a classic VPN? Most of our servers have IP addresses that do show up as being in data centers. We have a new program coming along, and unfortunately got stopped here for 2 weeks. So a few people got to try it and they loved it. And on 17, we're taking care of our professional streamer customers first before we loop back to it. What we call hassle-free IPs. We can proxy your web traffic through residential IP addresses. And that is going to roll out to all of our paying customers. Let me just say this summer. I thought it was going to be, a week or two ago. Week or two before we get back to it, a week or two to do it. Let's say the end of the summer. We're going to have a new system up, which will do a much better job of making you look residential. Yeah. So most services think I'm on a VPN. Yep. Another solution, of course, is self-hosted servers. You can buy a license to get the server software from us and run it on your own machine. AWS Linux is very much based on Red Hat with some relatively minor changes, much like CentOS used to be. Yeah, I guess if you're not paying Red Hat, they're trying to make it harder and harder to do that.
There's Rocky these days, right? Which is a little bit.
Yeah. I need AdGuard VPN to get the BBC player to work in Canada. Yeah, so that's coming. We'll have residential IPs in the UK, in the US. Yeah. All right. So in other news, did you see Rocket Lab?
What's Rocket Lab?
Rocket Lab was a New Zealand satellite rocket launching company. It's been around since 2006, founded by Mark Rocket. Turns out he changed his name to Rocket 6 years before he launched Rocket Lab. So they started off trying to build really cheap rockets.
Okay.
They've been around for years making parts for other rockets, making thrusters and solar panels and this and that, making all these parts for satellites. For years, they actually moved to the US, but they've been around. They're been doing satellite stuff for a bunch of years. And so they just bought Iridium for $8 billion, right? So Iridium, of course, is a low Earth orbit satellite company.
Okay.
They were the original one, right? So they put 66 satellites up in orbit in the 90s and had working satellite phones. When you think of satellite phones as, these like giant bricks people hold to the side of their head, that's Iridium phones. They were the first guys to get phones working, but they've never figured out how to make money. They've actually gone bankrupt twice.
Oh wow.
So it's kind of brutal, but they have one incredible asset. They've got one of the 4 cellular frequency licenses that are good worldwide, right? All the other bands, right? When you say, oh, T-Mobile owns, the 1.8 gigahertz or whatever, that's in the US. And every country has auctions for the different bands. There are 4 bands good for satellite service between 1 and 2 gigahertz, where by treaty they agreed that they were going to auction them off to single companies that could use them worldwide. And Iridium had one. So it's at 1.6 gigahertz. They've got like 8 megahertz of bandwidth.
Mm-hmm. So that band is worth $8 billion right now.
That band is apparently worth $8 billion. I said there are 4 of these bands. Who else has them? Well, Global Star had one. And as you may recall, Amazon bought them in April for 11 billion. Now, Global Star had the band and they had a contract with Apple, right? So I guess the contract with Apple was worth about 3 billion. Yeah. And the frequencies were worth 8 billion. And then Echo Star had a block. I think it was a little higher, that SpaceX picked up for 17 billion. So that's everybody.
And is that band more suited for regular internet browsing?
I mean, these are like 8 megahertz bands, right? So you can do like 5G on them, right? It's not a vast amount of data, right? So if you have a small number of satellites, Iridium had 66 satellites covering the whole world. Those are big cones it's putting out. And so everyone in that cone is sharing that bandwidth. So they all ended out with, 7 kilobits, 70 kilobits of bandwidth when they used it for internet, because everyone in this, circle that was, 1/60th of the Earth were sharing the bandwidth. But the modern satellites, like the new SpaceX satellites, where each satellite is shooting down 20 different type beams, right? And there are 10,000 satellites. So now they're chopping the world into 20,000 areas. And so, there's a lot more bandwidth to go around. I mean, they're talking about you will be able to do video calls. I don't think you'll ever see gigabit for this kind of thing. But they're talking about, that FaceTime should work.
Was Mark Rocket making parts for SpaceX? Or just...
Actually, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I kind of feel like SpaceX is pretty big on vertical integration. It's their product, it's their satellite, it's their rocket, it's their, but it's not impossible if there was some part in it. All right. A whole bunch of questions. We were ranting there. I had a World Cup party and the stream kept dropping to a lower resolution. Was this a likely QoS issue? Is it possible to figure out if deresolution is speed related? All right, so he's watching a live stream and getting poor performance. What does he do?
Well, I mean, it depends what internet connections you have. I mean, you're gonna want to make sure that you have enough bandwidth to stream all of that in real time. And if there's a problem with the Speedify VPN that you're suspecting you do have enough, download bandwidth, then you should send logs over to us, and we should fix it up pretty quick. But
I've been working on a log analyzer.
Oh yeah,
it's not
ready yet.
It's not ready yet, but getting to the point that you guys, power user types, can look at your own log and see
if there's anything weird going on.
If there's anything weird going on, and when things went to hell, and why Speedify thought it was bad. At one point, I thought it would be a magical AI-powered thing, and now I think, if the AI could figure out the problem, we would have figured it out already. I think it's better just to give you the facts. All right. What are the improvements for professional live streamers planned for 17? What will be different? Integrated SRT support.
Mm-hmm.
Up until now, Speedify has recognized SRT and treated it as high priority traffic, the way it does other things. In the new Speedify, we actually read the SRT headers. And it turns out you should do slightly different things for the acknowledgement packets versus the data packets. So a lot more smarts around SRT and recognizing SRT. Sometimes people run SRT on weird ports, and sometimes we weren't recognizing it. But now we look at the front of the packet and say, whoa, this is an SRT packet, even though it's running on, port 9007, which isn't where it normally runs. So yes, much more SRT brains. What else?
Yeah, it's mostly about making sure that the ACKs and the NACKs are like getting priority over the actual data packets, and that the timing is, that the timestamps and that are like that the traffic is making it to the SRT server and back.
Yeah, a lot of
reasonable
improvements in the
amounts of
jitter buffer. Partly just making it work better, partly recognizing that some packets shouldn't be jitter buffered.
Right. Yeah.
The packets that say that there's a problem here should be zipped right through it at high speed, where the actual data packet should be, right? So adjustments to jitter buffer to understand that different packets are different. And of course, as I said, SRT, we're now recognizing which packets are which.
Yeah.
So that the whole thing goes together nicely.
Yeah. It's important because if the SRT is not acknowledging and negatively acknowledging enough packets and in time, then those packets can't get retransmitted to the SRT server if there's link loss outside of the speed server on your path to the internet.
SRT is very sensitive
to reordering and latency. Yeah, I mean it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So to some extent, one might argue that some of the things we're improving here are just things that should be fixed in SRT, but it's not my business. All right. When streaming, sometime our weakest connection, 4G dongle, grays out and sits at the bottom of the list with no throughput, with Starlink invariably at the top. Is this okay? Are we configured? So let's try this. Woohoo! Fancy. So every connection, oh my gosh. Look at that. This is Speedify running on this Mac in front of me. And the streams here are actually the streams. And it turns out all of our internet connections are going through the same Comcast cable modem. So I just plugged in this iPhone, and you see it immediately appears AT&T. Yay. So now we really do have two internet connections that we're streaming to you over. But every connection has a priority. And priority, you click on it. Oh, sorry. Boop, there we go. All right. Has a priority. And automatic means you're trusting Speedify to figure it out. But priority basically means what's the cost of this connection. Primary means go ahead and use it all the time. Secondary says try to use a little less, but you're okay with using it for a speed boost. Just, try to use primary first. Backup means just use it to keep me online. Otherwise, I'd prefer you not use it, and never means don't use it. So most of the time, it's a question of what connections are primary and which are secondary. So if you leave it on automatic, we will decide that most things like cable modems and fiber connections are primary. And we will decide that cellular secondary. Bluetooth works so badly, that's a backup. And Starlink is primary. There's some drama. Not everyone agrees. Starlink is primary unless it starts reporting that it has issues. There are various things in the API that we hit where it can tell us things like it's being throttled because you've used too much data this month, or it has a poor view of the sky. And in those cases, for the most part, we move it to secondary or backup, depending on how messed up it is. I've been kind of thinking about whether there's an option to say when it's working great, should it be primary or should it be secondary? Because if you manually set it to secondary and not automatic, then you're also turning off our rules for saying, oh, this is so terrible, I'm moving it to backup, right? So that's a little tricky. Getting aside here. So I assume that what's going on is that your 4G dongle, which grays out and sits at the bottom of the list with no throughput, is probably doing really badly. If you really want it used and stuff, you can try changing priority. It's probably on automatic, so it's probably on secondary. We notice it's terrible and drop it down. You can try to force it with primary, but my guess is that it's probably working right. I mean, that Speedify is working right, and noticing that your dongle is not working very well.
Right, that's my suspicion too. Dongles can misbehave a lot. We've seen a lot of very strange dongles with very unique behavior. If it's gray, that means that we recognize it as an interface, but that the connection is not working, for example, because we don't have an IP address.
I'm interested in comparing Speedify against something like Peplink and their Speed Fusion solution. Yeah. Go for it. Wait till 17, but no, but people have been telling us for ages that we're as good or better than Peplink. And the nice thing about Peplink, the advantage they have over us is that they'll sell you hardware fully configured, where we're like, oh, here's software you put on OpenWRT router. There is, of course, a solution, MIRI, M-I-R-I. These guys make great routers. This is the X510, solid aluminum case. Comes with Linux, OpenWRT variant, and it's got 4 Ethernet. It's got a 5G modem with 4x4 MIMO. It's got a 4G modem. It's got Wi-Fi. It's got USB ports on the front where you can tether more phones and modems. Batteries. Hot swappable batteries. It only needs one battery to run, or you can plug it in. So you can put one battery in, and then when it's getting low, put the other battery in, and then take that one out and just go for days. So at Miri.tech, you can see this bad boy. It's pretty nice. Very nice device. There are other smaller solutions too. I mean, you can get a GLI net. There are lots of GLI net routers. Our stuff tends to work pretty well on them.
Budget routers.
Yeah. Travel routers.
Right.
All right. For me, I want to unify my Spectrum cable modem 950 megabits with my AT&T 70 megabits and my T-Mobile 5G backup. Yeah, so a rule of thumb we found is that if one connection is 10 times faster than the other connection, then adding the other connection adds nothing. Mm-hmm. So, the 70 megabit and the 5G, putting those together, that makes sense. But if you have a 950 megabit, those other guys are backups, right? 99% of the time, your computer should just use that cable modem with the 950 megabits and not use the other ones, unless something messes up. And, hey, I've got Comcast here. I have had both good and terrible experiences. Actually, we had a whole series of terrible experiences, and it really made Speedify look great. Every time I did a live stream, I was able to say, oh, look, the Comcast just failed. And finally, someone here called Comcast and says, why does it fail every day? And they said, that doesn't come. And they sent technicians and rewired this whole block because they said, oh, this is terrible. You guys have such weak signal. All right, so what is SRT? SRT is a new streaming protocol. Newish. I mean, these things move so slowly.
Right.
That you'd be 10 years old and the new thing. It's meant to replace protocols like RTMP, RTSP, right? It's for streaming live video over the internet. And like YouTube still doesn't support it. But I think Facebook does. And a lot of people, apparently now, professionals will stream SRT from their device to some server that translates it to RTMP to give it to YouTube. That seems jury rigged.
Yep.
All right. For me, I'm wondering if I can find a better solution than what I'm getting today with my Unify UCG fiber, where I really don't like their load balancing algorithm. Yeah. Speedify does have a load balancing algorithm as well, and depending on your situation. I guess I should mention it. Oops, what am I doing here? Bonding mode, local load balancer. Turn Speedify into a load balancer. You don't get a lot of the magic that Speedify can do with spreading things out across connections and failing over without you noticing. But there are situations where if you have just huge numbers of people just browsing the web, you know, lots and lots and lots of sockets, and you don't really need the failover stuff. It's available. We're a pretty smart load balancer.
So the load balancing will load balance connections, but not packets, right?
Right. So in load balancer mode, this is important. Each socket, each upload, download, or video call, when it's created, we put it on one of your internet connections. So if you create a bunch of sockets, we'll put them on. We'll spread your traffic out across the internet connections. But once a socket is put in load balancer mode on a connection, it has to live there the whole time. So if a connection gets slower and slower, it gets slower and slower. We can't move it.
Which is not
Where
the case
in either speed or redundant mode, we're really smart about juggling across connections, and we can move things from one connection to another. All right. All right. I mentioned what's going on. Oh, sorry. I mentioned that Speedify uses C++ and has glue code in Swift, Java, C++, TypeScript, and there's also Rust. Why so many programming languages? Isn't it better just stick to one? Different programming languages are good at different jobs. And different operating systems have preferred languages, particularly mobile. Apple wants you using Swift.
Yeah.
Android used to want you using Java, and now they want you in Kotlin. So by the way, in Speedify 17.1, every line of Java in Speedify is going to be replaced with Kotlin. So we are modernizing bit by bit. A couple releases ago, it was kind of quiet. Every line of JavaScript was replaced with TypeScript. We're moving into the future, boys. But yeah, so to get at the Android APIs, you really want to use Kotlin. To get at the iOS APIs, you really want to use Swift. To go fast, you want to use C++ or Rust. I think if we started today, we would pick Rust. Yeah. But we've been doing this for 10 years. Rust was invented while we were working on Speedify. So that's not going to work. So we've been doing little pieces in Rust, and I've been very pleased with what we've seen. But there is a lot of C++ code that people depend on. So there you are. But yeah, the user interface, we want it to be able to run the web browser. So, C++ totally out. You've got to be, TypeScript or JavaScript, right?
Right. Yeah. Different languages have different philosophies about the world. It would be insane to write a kernel driver in TypeScript. Like technically possible, but yeah.
Wait a second. All right. First of three. All right. I have two bad connections, and when I use Speed Plus, it uses them redundant, and that makes them together increase packet loss and seem to choke. But when used in speed mode to bond them, the connection seems more comfortable. Why is it was redundant? They seem to work badly together. I thought they were independent, so if one is choking, the other should not be affected.
That's an interesting problem.
Sounds like a problem for Kevin.
Kevin is not here.
Can you send us logs after seeing this? We'd like to reproduce this in our lab. This could be one of the things we fixed in 17, but I don't know that. If you could get this to happen and send us logs, you know, in Speedify, you go to the menu, and there's generate logs, and you click that, see, and it'll tell us more about what's happening. Is SRT related to WebRTC? No.
I mean, they're both streaming protocols.
They're both streaming protocols, but neither is using the other or spun out of the other. I've had good experiences in the past with Comcast, but I've had horrible problems with Spectrum, which is why I need secondary and tertiary backups. Yeah. Like I said, Comcast, I mean, when we complained enough, they came and rewired our block. Now it works pretty good. So I think a lot of my Comcast experience was one bad cable that I used for years. By the way, having any jitter buffer makes showing and taking out comments on the screen very laggy. Is that normal?
That would be abnormal for 1 millisecond of jitter buffer, but if you have like 700 milliseconds of jitter buffer, that makes a lot of sense.
The jitter buffer gets applied both ways, by the way. So if you add 100 milliseconds of jitter buffer, that's increasing your total ping time by 200 milliseconds.
Yeah.
So don't go crazy and type 500 in that box. I think we might have capped you at 500, but all right. The ISP has great ping and is robust, but limited to 42 down or below. I've only had slight improvements when bonding with faster, sometimes over 200 down. Connection. Tell us, has no foreseeable plans to give our community the fiber that it so boasts. Tell us it's Canada, right? Is TypeScript used almost exclusively on Windows, or is it also used elsewhere? The user interface. This whole Speedify user interface is Angular and Angular 21 and TypeScript.
TypeScript's used everywhere.
Yeah.
It was developed by the same person who made C# though, originally for Windows. I mean, not for Windows, but C# is used a lot in the .NET space.
C#'s pretty nice.
Yeah, I've heard it is nice.
A lot of Connectify Hotspot. Our first product ended up
no way
in C#. Yeah, it was good. I don't know. Trendy to complain about Microsoft, but all right. Without the ISP provided internet, I am not allowed to get standard TV. Our reception has our community has 0 TV reception. So you can bypass some traffic, if that's what you're saying. Again, in Speedify, bypass. We've got a lot of apps defined, but you can go to custom and you can add either IP addresses, ports, or domains. That's probably what you want. There might be a few domain names you need to unlock the app. So it just goes around Speedify. Basically, it will be load balanced. But if they're blocking VPNs, that might help you. So going back, so yeah, there are these global licenses. That are good, for blocks between 1 and 2 gigahertz, right? For cellular service. And this is what, this is what the hyperscalers are paying billions for. It's about $8 billion to get 8 megahertz worldwide. And that 1 to 2 gigahertz spectrum is like pretty valuable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can get a decent sized chunk to go, but it can make it through. You know, it's low enough it can make it through some things. Well, I think by the time you put it in space, you know, make it through some foliage and stuff. So it's valuable stuff. Yeah, it was. They were all allocated back in the 90s, right? The ITU. They had this, you know, mobile satellite service bands. They thought 4 would be enough.
4 companies.
4
I mean,
4
in the
services.
business of
Competition.
manufacturing monopolies. I don't understand what the point of that was.
You know, 4 satellite
Via
service ones.
treaties,
I mean,
too.
after all, you know, I mean, each country has blocks that they control themselves, right?
Hmm.
And, you know, and obviously they're not making more spectrum. You can't, right? Although you can use tighter and tighter beams on your antennas, which is almost the same thing.
Hmm. So do you think that that Mark Rocket is going to be a big player, compete with SpaceX? Do you think that the obvious competitor has emerged?
This is such an expensive game.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, at this point, Starlink has 10,000 satellites up there. 10,000 satellites.
That's a lot of satellites.
You know, I talked to, what can name? I talked to a startup that had this plan that they were going to launch a couple dozen satellites, and they were going to have this cheap service that let you get 2 packets per day to your weather stations. They had it all thought through. It was going to be the world's slowest internet, but it was going to be only a couple bucks. So if you just had some sensor that wanted to report like what it saw, you could press into 1 packet, and when the satellite goes overhead, you send it, right? I mean, if you have temperature sensor in Antarctica, right? Nobody wants to go out there. And, you know, I thought it was pretty cool. Then I was talking to someone else and said, oh, they're completely screwed. If they start getting traction, Starlink's going to announce a 1,000 packets a day for $3, right? It just wipe them out, right? 10,000 satellites. If people want small number of packets, they'll sell a small number of packets. So I don't know. I mean, the U.S. government is trying to make sure that Amazon launches their service, right? And they're keeping pressure on them, right? So by July 30th, Amazon Leo was supposed to have 1/2 of their satellites up, 1,600 satellites by 3 weeks from now. And they need to have 3,300 satellites by July 30th, 2029. They have 331 satellites up. They have missed by 80%. You know, they're 1,200 satellites short of where they're supposed to be at this point. The government gave them a really weak penalty that, you know, some Starlink satellites can use their frequencies for the next 20 months because they don't have enough satellites to use them. And that makes everybody uncomfortable. And it feels like a pretty big penalty to have Starlink poking around in your frequencies, right? And they didn't move the deadline for getting the 3,300 satellites up. They didn't move the whole thing. And, you know, Leo's problem isn't that they don't have enough satellites. They're apparently making multiple satellites a day now. Problem is rockets.
Oh.
Right? They were using Blue Origin, and Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket blew up. And now the FAA has grounded them until they can fully explain why that rocket exploded and what they fixed to make sure that's never going to happen again.
Do you think that's a reasonable reaction from the FAA, or should they just let Blue Origin experiment more?
I think it's reasonable.
Yeah. The explosion was big.
Oh, the explosion was incredible. People were saying you have to watch this video, and I watched, and there's rocket and a tower, and the rocket explodes, and the whole screen goes orange, and there's a mushroom cloud, and then it ends, and I'm looking at the tower, and I'm like, that was pretty big, but didn't destroy the tower. Somebody else said, what are you talking about? Watch the video again. Watch the video again. There were 3 towers next to the rocket. When the explosion's done, there was 1 rock. It took down 2 towers and left 1. So yeah, like they seriously damaged their launch facility too, right? A lot of things just got vaporized. I live in Ecuador, and if I talk through WhatsApp video with my sister who lives in Spain, what happens if only one of us uses Speedify but not the other versus both of us using Speedify? So your link from your phone to our server on the internet uses Speedify. So her phone ends out essentially doing a video call with our server since she's not using it. Thinks it's talking to your phone, but it's actually talking to our server, and then our server is talking Speedify down to your phone. So that's a lot. But it works, right? So problems with your internet connections, with the internet connections between you and the Speedify server, we work to fix. But once it leaves our server on the way to her, it's just regular internet traffic. If she used Speedify as well, then in the end, she's got Speedify in her link to some server near her. You've got Speedify in yours to some, and your 2 servers are doing the video call protocol between each other. We've talked a lot about doing stuff where companies can have Speedify servers where people making calls can make them through the one server, right? Make the dedicated servers really optimized for video calls. But it hasn't happened. So right now, we have servers on the internet. Your connection to it is bonded. Her connection to whichever server is closest to her, which probably one in Spain, is bonded. And then the regular protocols go back and forth between them. From what point decided to innovate Speedify? Were there any complications? So an interesting thing, we got the idea for Speedify. We drew it on the whiteboard. Me, Brian, and Pana. And we designed Speedify, a lot of it, in just one conversation on a whiteboard. And then we realized that this was such a huge project, we probably couldn't just do it. So then we designed Dispatch, our smart load balancer, in the corner of the same whiteboard. And we built that first. Because we thought we had to get going. And we wanted to prove to people that we could do things with multiple internet connections. So that's why we built a load balancer first. And then when we got Speedify working, we kind of dropped interest in it. But people kept asking, so we eventually added that back to Speedify. So that's not the original one anymore. But we still sometimes, you'll catch us talking about the local load balancer feature as Dispatch, just because that's what we called our old load balancer. But yeah, it was tough. There was a long time we thought it couldn't work on an iPhone, that Apple wouldn't let us. But eventually it did. They had us write this whole essay about, why bonding would improve the experience of Apple iOS users. And they accepted us, and they let us in the store, and their networking people actually had us out to California. And yeah, they were nice. So there was a couple of years where Speedify was on Mac, Windows, Linux. and not on mobile. Kind of the forgotten years. So a lot of times we say that we launched Speedify in 2016, but that's actually when we launched the iPhone version. And that's when suddenly we exploded it into large numbers of users and stuff. But the sort of the core, the C++ with a web interface, that's been true since 2016. At the beginning, we played around with Windows Live, building Windows. I think there was a web form interface at the very big, a Windows form interface, whatever that thing is. But yeah, Speedify is recognizable from 2016 on, I think. Oh, does that answer what you're... yeah. So Starlink doesn't have a spectrum between 1 and 2 gigahertz of their own. So that's why they're going around doing deals with operators, right? That's why they're like, if you have T-Mobile, your phone can connect to Starlink, because they don't have one of these bands. The higher frequencies, they have huge chunks of bandwidth. Actually, here's a weird twist. The new version of 5G that just got approved, 5G release 19, they've added the Iridium band into the standard list of bands that all cell phones should support.
No way.
And it wasn't there before. So that's probably too late for the iPhone 18, right? They've probably already got their chips and stuff. But certainly by the iPhone 19, it'll just be able to talk 5G, right? All the chips are just going to come out of the box with support for that channel. So they got that done. That probably greatly increases the value of that spectrum, right? Now you don't have to run weird satellite stuff on it,
and it's
or buy special phones.
Yeah,
you can just run 5G. Oh, do you know if there's a good router that has more and higher speed Ethernet interfaces? I'd like fiber IV 2.5 gigabits or even 10 gigabit Ethernet. We've been mucking around with the Banana Pi 4 Pro.
Yeah.
And that has...
I think it has a 10 gigabit serial port. And does it have a 2.5 Ethernet? Yeah, it does have a 2.5 Ethernet, right? Although they couldn't... It has a 10 gigabit Ethernet and an SFP? I forget.
Something, the different ports have different speeds.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this one's 10, this one, and this is...
Yeah. And I think two of them are like they negotiate lower speeds if you have them both plugged in at the same time as well. Is that right?
Oh.
It's weird. I don't know the Banana Pi, but it's got a lot of ports.
I always wondered why all those, USB-C hubs, or USB 3, USB 4, still have those A ports that only run USB 2.
They do.
They all do. And the reason is that a video, if it turns out the answer is if it has an HDMI port, then it has a USB 2 port. Because the high-speed USB today has the high-speed lines that can do video and a bunch of lower speed lines that can only go hundreds of megabits. So if you give up one USB-C port to get an HDMI, then you have these free low-speed wires that you might as well put on a USB 2 port.
Cool.
Right.
Interesting.
So that's why USB 2 ports are still on all these modern devices that are USB 3.3, and then there's this one goofy port. It's because for every video port you get one free goofy port. So Raspberry Pi, Banana Pi. Sorry, the Banana Pi 4s. Seem like pretty good devices for pros.
For R4 Pro.
R4 Pro.
Yeah.
So we've been running OpenWRT on it, and
Been experimenting with it.
experimenting. But I think Brian's pretty happy.
Yeah, he is.
He's got one. All right. Cool. Yeah, we're at 11 o'clock. I feel like I've answered most of your questions. If you've had other problems, feel free to send logs, shoot an email to support at speedify.com. We are here to help. And it was good chatting with you guys. And thank you, Will. I know you're very busy. All right. Later, guys. See you all online.